Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of interesting sources and, well, pull out the really important stuff just for you. Think of it as your shortcut to getting up to speed, maybe with a few surprises along the way. Today, we're diving into biosynthetic technology, specifically how it's shaking things up in textiles and apparel. We've got a research paper, some related articles, and our mission, really, is to unpack how living systems might actually create our future clothes and materials. Some seriously innovative stuff here. We'll explore the big ideas, the possibilities, without getting too bogged down in the jargon. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, and what's really striking right from the start, looking at this research paper, is how they frame this whole thing. It's not just, another manufacturing trend. They're talking about it as potentially driving a fourth industrial revolution, and it's powered mostly by what they're calling third-generation biotechnology.
Like a fourth industrial revolution. Wow.
The core idea is this concept of living technology. The paper puts it really well. Cells become both the machine and the operating system. That's a pretty fundamental shift, isn't it, how we think about making things?
Living technology. Yeah, it sounds almost like sci-fi. But you're saying it's closer than we think.
Well, the paper points out it's not some distant dream. The World Economic Forum, they flag systems metabolic engineering.
Okay, what's that exactly?
That's basically using microbes as like tiny chemical factories, self-replicating ones.
Ah, right.
And the WF called that a top emerging tech back in 2016.
2016. So this idea has been on the radar for a while. It leverages the efficiency of biology. Yeah.
Exactly. And a key part of this is synthetic biology. It's not just tweaking existing life forms. It's about designing and building, totally new biological parts and systems, or significantly redesigning the ones we already have for specific useful purposes. And the research stresses this isn't just for medicine or energy. It's seen as a powerful tool for tackling global challenge environment, yes, but also material development.
And it's not just some niche academic thing either, is it? I think the paper mentioned the UK government.
That's right. Back in 2012, they flagged synthetic biology as key for economic growth. They even projected its market value would shoot up.
2012. So, yeah, serious players have seen the potential for a long time. A strategic bet, really. But why the big surge in interest now, especially for textiles? What's driving that?
Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, the research really highlights a critical factor. The immense strain we're putting on the planet. We're using something like 50% more resources each year than the Earth can naturally regenerate.
50% more. That's huge.
And for textiles specifically, think about it. The industry leans heavily on resources that are running low, like oil.
Right. The main ingredient for so many synthetics.
Exactly. Or resources under pressure, like fresh water, which you need loads of for agriculture, including cotton.
Yeah, and farming itself is facing huge issues with climate change. Another layer of complexity.
And then there's just people. The UN thinks we'll hit about 9.6 billion globally by 2050.
9.6 billion.
That's a massive jump in demand for clothes, for shelter, for food, all competing for the same limited resources.
It really drives home that idea of the Anthropocene, doesn't it? This human-dominated era.
Absolutely. The paper mentions how this period is literally marked by our man-made materials showing up in the geological record.
Like future fossils of our old clothes.
Pretty much. And our current way of doing things, the linear take, make, dispose model, especially in textiles, it just doesn't stack up anymore. It's not sustainable in this context.
The waste figures are just mind-boggling. The paper says in the UK alone, it's over 2 million tons of clothing and textile waste every year.
And globally. Billions of tons of waste, toxic chemicals discharged.
Yeah.
It paints a really stark picture.
Okay, so against that backdrop, how does this programming life idea offer a different path?
That's the core question, really. The paper suggests synthetic biology offers a fundamentally different way. By programming biological systems to make materials, we could potentially get control over the entire life cycle.
The whole life cycle, from start to finish.
Yeah, from the raw material right through to what happens when you're done with the product. It could lead to these more integrated models, thinking about the material, the energy used, the manufacturing, assembly, even disposal, all together.
So moving away from take, make, dispose towards something more like a circular economy.
Exactly. Where waste isn't really waste.
The paper mentions biodegradable materials, or even waste being remanufactured, fed back into the loop.
That's the potential, yeah. A closed loop.
It's a
Powerful idea.
Imagine it.
And it could mean Totally new resource streams, new kinds of materials with amazing properties, different ways of designing things, even new education, new markets, new services built around all this.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Well, yeah, the paper is clear on this too. It's not all rosy. There are big ethical questions, regulatory hurdles, and the risk of greenwashing is very real.
Yeah.
Making things seem eco-friendly when they're maybe not, plus just fundamental moral questions we need to figure out as a society.
Right. Okay, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts. How do you actually program life to make stuff? What are the building blocks?
The research goes into this. It talks about scientists essentially digitizing biology.
Mm-hmm.
Think of DNA ACTG.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists can now translate that chemical information into computer code, ones and zeros. Craig Venter pointed this out years ago.
Digitizing biology. So DNA is the blueprint, the core information.
Right.
Then RNA. That makes a working copy of instructions.
Kind of like transcribing a specific recipe from the main cookbook, yeah.
Okay. And ribosomes are the construction crew.
Yeah.
Reading the RNA and building proteins.
Exactly. Proteins do all the work in the cell. And then replication just copies the main DNA blueprint. It's this incredibly complex, tiny, self-running factory. And synthetic biology goes beyond just understanding it. The aim is to design and build new organisms, or modify existing ones in really novel ways.
And how do they do that? The paper mentions biobricks.
Yeah, biobricks are key. Think of them as standardized DNA parts, like biological Lego bricks.
Lego for biology. Okay, I like that.
You can assemble them using something called plasmids, little extra bits of DNA to insert new instructions. It lets scientists build these biological circuits to get microbes to do specific tasks. It could totally revolutionize how we design things.
So instead of designing a fabric, you could be designing the microbe that grows the fabric.
Potentially, yes. Or at least the fiber. It's a mind-bending shift.
Definitely. The paper calls synthetic biology a platform technology or living technology. What does that mean practically for industries?
It's drawing a parallel, really.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how synthetic chemistry, mostly based on fossil fuels, drove industry in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Right. Plastics, pharmaceuticals, fertilizers, all that.
Synthetic biology could be the 21st century equivalent. But instead of mainly using oil, it could use a much wider range of bio-based feedstocks, supporting a much bigger, more diverse bioeconomy.
Bio-based feedstocks. Okay, that makes sense. We understand the how a bit better now. But if these biological factories are going to run, what do they eat? The paper brings up this feedstock question. It sounds like it's not always simple or sustainable.
That's a really crucial point, yeah. These systems need food to grow, feedstocks, and they can vary a lot. Sometimes, like the paper mentions with modern meadows, early cultured leather using fetal calf stem cells. Well, that raises obvious ethical and sustainability flags.
Yeah, definitely.
Other times it might be something simple, seemingly cheap, like sugar to grow bacterial cellulose.
But wait, even using sugar, that's not automatically green, is it?
Good point. The paper raises that concern too. If we scale up massively, needing huge amounts of sugarcane, for instance,
We could just end up with the same problems we have with cotton, right? Land use, impact on soil, impact on communities.
Exactly. Monoculture farming on a vast scale. Just because it's bio-based doesn't make it inherently sustainable. We have to think really carefully about the global scalability of these microscopic systems. What are the long-term ecological effects?
Do we have enough land to grow the feedstocks for everything without messing up food production or ecosystems?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It needs very careful thought. It's not just the tech, it's the whole system around it.
Right. Okay, let's pivot to some real-world examples, things actually being made. The paper highlights a few. First, this work by Montalti, the growing lab, using mycelium.
Yes, mycelium. That's the root network of fungi.
Okay.
Montalti, through his lab and company, is really exploring mycelium's potential for materials. But his vision is bigger than just replacing old stuff. He talks about cultivating a whole new landscape of grown objects, even a new economic model.
Grown objects.
And what's cool is he embraces the natural look and feel of the mycelium. He's not trying to make it look like plastic or leather. He wants this sort of symbiotic relationship with the material.
That's fascinating, designing with the organism's nature, not against it. Okay, then there's bioesters. They won an award.
Yeah, Biodesign Challenge winners. They developed a bio-based yarn from alginate.
Alginate. That's from seaweed, right?
Correct. And what's notable is their focus on circularity. They figured out how to turn alginate, often used in sheets, into a yarn you can knit or weave.
So potentially a more closed-loop system for fashion.
That's the idea. Seaweed grows fast, it's relatively abundant, And alginate can be biodegradable, so it ticks a lot of boxes for end-of-life issues.
Interesting. And then the one getting a lot of buzzbolt threads, bioengineered spider silk. How on earth did they do that?
Pretty clever.
Yeah.
They essentially reprogram microorganisms, like bacteria or yeast, using synthetic biology. They give them the genetic constructions to produce the same proteins spiders use for silk.
Wow, okay.
And the result is this material that's reportedly stronger than steel by weight, but softer than merino wool.
Stronger than steel, softer than wool. That's quite a combination.
Huge potential, right? Strength, elasticity. It could be used across the whole textile industry, offering a serious alternative to petroleum-based synthetics.
So materials with performance that might even beat traditional ones. It really does feel like a potential leap in material science. But it's not just big companies and university labs doing this stuff, is it? The paper mentioned a DIY bio movement, biohacking.
Absolutely. Outside the usual R&D structures, there's this really vibrant scene. Hackspaces, community groups, DIY biolabs.
Like London Biohack Space, GenSpace in Brooklyn, those kinds of places.
Exactly. They're hubs where all sorts of people come together. Artists, engineers, biologists, programmers, designers. They collaborate, they learn, they share information openly, really pushing boundaries in material experimentation.
So it's like grassroots innovation, democratizing the tech.
Kinda, yeah. GenSpace, for example, runs workshops on everything from biowort to genome editing, gets the public involved.
That seems really important, actually.
It could be crucial for fostering, diverse and maybe more ethical approaches as this whole field develops. It's not just about the commercial side.
Which leads nicely into thinking about design itself. The paper says biodesign is both ancient and futuristic. How so?
Well, ancient in the sense that humans have always worked with biology, wood, leather, natural dyes, fermentation. That's all biodesign in a way.
Okay, designing with biology.
But futuristic because now, with synthetic biology, we're moving towards designing biology itself. That's the radical shift.
Designing life.
Yeah. As Professor Carol Kellett puts it, biology becomes both the hardware and the software for making things. The paper even floats this idea of computer-aided biofacture CAB. The Petri dish is the new toolbox. DNA code is the new design software.
So the designer's role changes completely. Instead of just shaping materials, they might be designing the organisms that make the materials.
That's the potential trajectory. You could have biological designers using software to instruct living systems.
Which means fashion and textile education would need a major overhaul.
Totally. And our basic design principles, in its aesthetics, form, function, they all need rethinking if your object is, well, alive or grown. Things like lifespan, circularity, biodegradability, the product's relationship with nature. They become central, not afterthoughts.
A whole new design paradigm, maybe. Informed by biology to fix the problems of the old linear disposable mindset.
That's the hope, I think.
The paper itself seems to be doing some of that critical thinking. It mentions using contestable design.
Yeah, using design grounded in real science, not just fantasy, to provoke discussion.
Ah, like thought experiments made real.
Exactly. Critical and speculative design can be a form of research itself. By making these, maybe hypothetical objects or scenarios, designers can open up conversations about impacts, ethics, meaning. Like Congdon's biological atelier concept, imagining a fashion studio in 2080 growing materials from cells. It blurs the lines between designer, scientist, craftsman.
Really makes you think. The paper also brings in Collett's framework, biomimicry to biofacture, as a model for sustainable design with living systems.
Yes, it offers a way to think about different levels of engagement. From just being inspired by nature, conceptualize nature, all the way to actively reprogramming it or hybridizing it.
So, nature as coworker, reprogrammed nature, hybridized nature. Different ways designers might interact with biology.
And different roles they might take. The paper mentions designers as agent provocateurs, deliberately poking at the ethical issues, questioning the hype around high-tech sustainability.
Which brings up some really deep questions about fashion's future. The paper asks about semi-living garments. Is that a real possibility?
It's definitely out there as a speculative idea. If clothes are biofactured by living cells, maybe engineered organisms, how does that change everything?
Design, aesthetics, function, our whole relationship with what we wear.
Exactly. Would people want to wear something semi-living? Or genetically engineered? Maybe it sounds creepy.
Yeah, maybe.
But then again, maybe these garments could do amazing things. Warn you about pollution, protect you from hazards, actively clean the air.
Wow. That could foster a totally different connection with our clothes with nature even, and really boosts that circular economy idea.
Potentially, it opens up a huge design space.
And would we need new words for these materials? The paper suggests new classifications.
It does, like synthetic biofibers, engineered organisms making known fibers, maybe better ones.
Okay, like bio-cotton or bio-wool.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And then synthetic biofabrics, where the organism grows the actual fabric structure directly, maybe with smart features built in.
Growing the whole fabric, that could bypass so many traditional steps, right? Spinning, weaving.
That's the idea. Potentially much less resource intensive, less wasteful. Biofibers are like upgrading the thread. Biofabrics are like growing the whole cloth.
It's fascinating that this isn't just about clothes. You mentioned concrete, self-healing concrete.
Yeah, the paper briefly touches on it. Drexel University's biofiber idea is a great example. They infuse these hydrogel fibers containing bacteria spores into the concrete mix.
Bacteria spores in concrete.
Right. And when tiny cracks form, which they always do in concrete, the spores germinate. They wake up, grow, and precipitate calcium carbonate, basically limestone, which fills the crack. It heals itself.
That's incredible. So concrete structures could last much longer, be more sustainable.
Huge potential implications for infrastructure, yeah.
Mm.
It really shows how bio-inspired or bioengineered materials could pop up everywhere.
Okay, wow. But let's bring it back to textiles, because there's another urgent issue. Microplastics. The Oslo Met report and that Reddit thread you shared paint a pretty worrying picture.
They really do. Oslo Met makes it clear. Washing our synthetic clothes is a major source of primary microplastics ending up in the ocean.
And synthetics are, what, over 60% of all textiles now?
Over 60%, yeah. Mostly made in Asia, so it's a massive global flow.
And these aren't just tiny bits of plastic floating around harmlessly. They cause physical harm, animals eating them, getting tangled.
Plus potential chemical impacts, too. They can soak up toxins and then get into the food chain.
The studies mentioned, Brown, Napper, and Thompson, they've actually measured how much fiber sheds during washing.
Yeah, they quantified it. And it depends on things like the fabric type. Fleece
Mm-hmm.
is notoriously bad garment quality, how you wash it. Hot water, long cycles seem worse.
So we definitely need to understand this better and manage it.
Absolutely.
The OECD report suggested policies like making fabrics that shed less, encouraging longer-lasting clothes.
Right, tackling it across the whole life cycle.
And that Reddit thread showed people are aware, but it's hard to avoid synthetics completely, isn't it? Especially for sportswear, outdoor gear.
Exactly. People get it, but the practicalities are tough. Users shared tips, wash less, wash cold, shorter cycles, which matches the science.
But they also mentioned the struggle to find affordable, purely natural options for everything.
Yeah, it highlights that we need both industry changes and shifts in consumer habits and options. It's not just one or the other.
Which loops us back perfectly to these bio-based alternatives. Could they be part of the solution to microplastics?
That's definitely part of the promise.
You mentioned things like Deserto cactus leather, these biofibers engineered to biodegrade, alginate making biopolymers.
Yeah, unlike synthetics that just break down into smaller plastic bits, the idea here is materials that can decompose naturally, like alginate seaweed-based materials. They could fundamentally break that cycle of persistent pollution.
So, potentially designing the end of life right into the material from the start.
That's the goal. And the Yale Sustainable Gear Study also emphasizes just choosing better materials, generally organic cotton, recycled stuff, and focusing on ethical production.
It all points towards that circular economy idea again, doesn't it? Like the Recovo article stressed, reduce, reuse, recycle, minimize impact.
Definitely. And it's being driven partly by regulations, but also by consumers just becoming more aware and demanding better options.
It's interesting, too, how the IJFMR review connects this to traditional crafts, like in India.
Yeah, pointing out that many traditional practices are inherently sustainable. They align with slow fashion, using natural, local materials, low-impact processes.
So reviving those crafts could be another part of the puzzle, supporting sustainability and ethical production.
Absolutely. It shows that solutions aren't always about brand new tech. Sometimes wisdom from the past offers valuable paths forward. Integrating old and new might be key.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. Biosynthetic tech, it's offering a pretty radical new way to think about textiles, apparel, materials in general.
Huge potential, right?
Mm.
Tackling environmental problems, creating amazing new stuff, maybe reshaping the whole industry towards something more sustainable, more circular.
Definitely huge potential. But, as the research makes really clear, it's not a magic bullet. There are still big questions. Is it truly sustainable long-term? What are the ethics? Can we actually scale these things up affordably and responsibly?
We're still pretty early in the journey from the lab petri dish to, clothes on the rack.
Very much so. Lots of research, innovation, and just careful thought still needed.
Still, the possibilities for this more bio-integrated future, for our clothes, for the stuff that makes up our world, they seem pretty significant, worth keeping a close eye on.
For sure. So, maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. As we get better at programming life to actually create our world, what does natural even mean anymore? And how will our relationship with the things we wear, the things we use, fundamentally change in this coming biodesign future? Lots to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.